like to welcome you to the joint committee meeting of the Cleveland Planning Commission, Cleveland Landmarks Commission, Downtown Flats Design Review, and Historic Warehouse District Design Review Committees. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. All activity is being recorded. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube and TV 20. All public comments have been received via the City of Cleveland Planning Commission website at the email listed on your screen for the viewing audience. Copies of all comments have been distributed to all members of committees and commissions prior to the meeting. Sherwin-Williams will respond to comments via their website at the address on your screen. With respect to housekeeping, we are going to be hearing first a presentation from Sherwin-Williams for 45 minutes. We will then transition into the committee presentations for 45 minutes, and we will close out with commissions at 45 minutes also. Mr. Chairman, the meeting is yours.
All right, before we get going, I'm going to have to swear you all in. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer under the penalty of perjury? Great, thank you very much. What we're going to do is you're going to do your presentation, and then design review is going to come in, and the other chairs and vice chairs are going to step out. And then once they finish talking with you and going through the presentation with you, then we're going to come in, both Landmarks and Planning Commission. Landmarks will go first, and Planning Commission will go last. So that's the order we're going to do this in.
I want to read this. So this project is actually seeking final approval for the new construction of the Sherwin-Williams headquarters. The project location is Public Square in the Warehouse District, Ward 3 Councilman Kerry McCormick. With us today, we have representatives from Sherwin-Williams Company, and we will be leading off with Matt Heisig of Volcon. Is that correct?
Tim
Muckley.
Tim Muckley from Sherwin-Williams.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Muckley. I'm the Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Sherwin-Williams Company. We got a lot to cover today, so I want to jump in and get started right away. First, quickly do some introductions. Here today helping present, there'll be Matt Heisig with Vocon, Bill Chilton with Picard Chilton, Nancy Clayton with Picard Chilton as well, Julie Young, Vice President of Communications for Sherwin-Williams, John Zegan with Osborne Engineering. We got Andrew Albers with OJB Landscaping, Jarek Boss with OJB Landscaping, and Marvin Randallson with Nelson Nygaard. So that's our team today. If you would, Matt, go to the next slide. So the last time we were before this committee, joint committee in September, we presented our schematic approval package. That was broken into 3 separate motions. One regarding the pavilion block, the tower block, and then the north block, which is the garage block. So as those were presented, at the pavilion block at the joint design review, it was approved with 3 conditions. At Planning Commission, the Joint Planning Commission, it was approved as presented. The tower, both committees and commissions and committees approved as presented. And then on the north block, the garage block, both committees approved with 4 different conditions. We're going to address during our presentation all 7 of those conditions, though, that were from our last meeting. Before we jump into our presentation, though, I wanted to start with at least two changes that you're going to see from our initial schematic design presentation. And both those concern the north block. And at schematic, we presented what we call a 4-bay garage. And it's basically 2 back-to-back bays here on the south side, 2 bays or 2 sets of parking stalls on the up ramp, 2 sets on the down ramp, and then 2 sets on the north side. So that's what we refer to as the 4-bay garage. And that 4-bay garage, we were very comfortable with that. In fact, our submittal for our mass excavation permit was for the 4-bay garage. However, one of our conditions that we had was to try to take a look at developing or could we expand the garage. And at the time, we were talking about could it go potentially vertically. So it kind of got us thinking. And so what we ended up doing is taking a look to look at maybe not expanding it vertically, but looking at how we could maybe spread it, horizontally. So what we ended up doing is moving from potentially we can do this, move from a 4-bay to a 3-bay garage. And maybe, Matt, if you could go back to that slide, which is basically you're losing a bay in the center up ramp. And what it does is it shrinks it from the north to south direction and keeps it the same east to west. Okay. And so there were a lot of advantages that we found with potentially going to the 3-bay garage. Did a couple things. Number one, it allowed us to potentially in the future to expand 1 more bay to the north. If this area up here maybe gets done for residential and you don't need all that land, it could be expanded. The advantage too is in order to expand it, you wouldn't have to shut down this garage. You could do that expansion at the same time. So that was a possibility, potential benefit. The other potential benefit is you can see we now have 134 feet versus 83 feet that we had with the 4-bay garage. The 83 feet is a pretty good depth for residential, but it's not a great depth for doing retail. So we figured that this actually gives you a little bit more options. And then the third advantage that we saw with this was it moved this exit from the garage further away from the intersection of West 3rd and Sinclair, which makes it a little bit easier for traffic to get in and out. Most of our traffic will be leaving, exiting the garage to the south, but there's still about 10% of our population that will be heading north. It gives a little bit more room between that intersection. So those were a lot of the advantages. And then when we looked at it, it actually added 5 more parking spaces within the garage. It added, I think, 48 more parking spaces, surface parking spaces. And it did change the service level just slightly of the garage, but really for the most part, the service level kind of remained the same. So from our perspective, this made a lot of sense to look at going from the 4-bay to the 3-bay. I would say that the other potential advantage that I want to talk about is the ability to, with the 3-bay, to possibly move the garage further north and widen the sidewalks along vacated Frankfurt Avenue. And just to kind of level set just a little bit. So in September, Frankfurt was vacated officially by City Council. So it's no longer a public street. It's a private drive that comes into the property. Our zoning requirement is to have a 5-foot cut-through sidewalk through the block. There is no street tree. There is no landscaping. There is no public art requirement along there. But what we're currently showing is a 9-foot sidewalk with a 6-foot planting area. So with that 3-bay garage, if we can, if that's otherwise, approved today, we can move this garage, 5 feet to the north. And what that would allow us to do is get a planting of street trees down down vacated Frankfurt sidewalk. And we really think that that would go a long way to helping. I know there's been a lot of conversation about the pedestrian experience along vacated Frankfurt. And I think that additional room would both be fine from the standpoint of the future development, but would also allow us to get those street trees put in there and provide a better pedestrian experience. So, with that, I think we looked at it, we have enough room for about 10 trees, and we would look at trying to do that of a caliper that was more of a mature tree, so that way, right from the bat, you kind of got that tree canopy. So I wanted to highlight those changes right off the bat, and then I'll turn it over to Matt to pick it up from here.
Thanks, Tim. Knowing we're pressed on time, I'll quickly just go through our overall planning just to reorient everybody, remind everybody how the planning is coming together. As Tim mentioned, our previous submittal and approvals were based on 3 different project components. We have the pavilion, which is essentially the front door of the facility, a 2-story structure. Across West 3rd Street, the office tower, 36 stories in height, and to the north is the parking structure that Tim just had referred to. Axometric view, you can see in the model as well. Some previous model shots of a conceptual model from our schematic presentation back in August. As far as orientation of the spaces within the building, this is a first floor shot of the tower and the pavilion. Again, the pavilion is the proper front door of the organization. All visitor traffic would come from Public Square into the pavilion lobby. Flanking the pavilion lobby on the ground floor would be our Center of Excellence and the barista, as we've spoken about in previous meetings. The first floor of the tower is essentially the employee entry. It's not to say that if a visitor wouldn't find their way there, they couldn't be greeted, but essentially the employee lobby exists along the stretch and the facade that fronts on West 3rd Street. Moving to the second floor, back to the pavilion, we have learning and development on both the north and south sides of the building. That is bifurcated by this center the lobby space, a 2-story space. Across the sky bridge on the second floor of the pavilion, the podium, we have the food hall. And then moving on to the 3rd level, we obviously have the roof of the pavilion, and the 3rd level of the office tower is our wellness center and our fitness center. Moving up into the office stack, we have shown here a typical low-rise floor, approximately, again, 28,000 feet nominally in gross square footage, which shows how the elevator cores work, stair towers work, in our open office floor plates. And then going up to the 14th level, which is our conference level, it's the level that is shown with the outdoor terraces. There's a diagram indicating how those terraces work, how access to the terraces work, to the conference center that goes on those floors.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. What I'd like to do is walk you through the design of the building as it's developed since September. And the sequence of it will sort of digitally walk around the pavilion and then the tower, and then Matt will review the garage specifically. But we'd also like to touch on just a couple more issues, one of those being exterior lighting, as well as signage. And then we will wrap up with landscape architecture to give you a sense of what it will mean, to be, on this campus after it's complete. One of the things that we've talked about in previous meetings is that not only the uniqueness of these 3 blocks, but the fact is it sort of functions as a single organism. And that relationship is not just internal to your employment, but it's to the city as well. And I'm going to go through quite a few slides here, and I'll go through them fairly quickly, but to give you a sense as we sort of walk around the pavilion, walk around the tower, and then Matt will do that with the garage, to give you a sense of certainly the scale and proportion, but the materiality as well. And I have up here, if you would like to look at them, some of the samples of both the tower glass and the glass at the ground level, as well as samples of the stone and the metal finishes of the curtain wall system. So with that, why don't we just jump right into it? Well, actually, let's start here. So this is a view of the pavilion. To give you a little bit of orientation, there's a little key up here. When you see the red, that's the angle. So public square is over here, and you're looking at the pavilion. And we've talked about the pavilion as the front porch. It's front porch for Sherwin-Williams, and that front porch faces public square. And just as every front porch has a front door, the front door here for Sherwin-Williams where really is where employees, visitors, customers, that is sort of the mixing, of you will, of this particular campus. Let me just walk through this slide here and just point out the tags that are a little bit hard to read. But let's start here, and this is again, we're looking at the east side of the pavilion. And there's a aluminum coping trim band here, aluminum soffit panels, and then spandrel glass. That's what you're seeing along here. And that color, that panel, is actually, and it's using a Sherwin-Williams coating, this is representative of that color. And then this is the high-performance vision glass. There's a glass guardrail here, aluminum accent band here, and then clear vision glass here. And the important thing relative to the vision glass is that the intent here is, particularly at ground level, that you can see activity in the building. And that it's because the glass here in the tower has more of a reflective tint to it for a number of reasons, not the least of which is energy performance. And then over here, it's basically sort of the same notations. So as I go through the slides, what you see in these other renderings will be consistent with those materials that I've pointed out. So this is a view looking down at the pavilion. One of the things that came up in our last meeting in September was the idea of a green roof. And so we looked into that. Also, I think it's important to note that we have engaged an avian consultant that is doing consulting relative to bird building collisions, or bird strikes as they're often called. And in fact, he was in Cleveland yesterday, all day, doing a survey of downtown and what's happening downtown right now relative to building collisions. The interesting thing is that there's actually some good news there. There are less collisions and evidence of that than he expected to see. But one of the points that he raised is actually green roofs can be an attractor for birds, and so can actually increase the number of bird building collisions. It's also important to note that the majority of bird and building collisions happen up to about 36 feet. So it's really the lower portion of the building. So he was advising not to use a green roof here. So what we've done is we've gone with the ballasted roof, but as you can see here, this is representative of a potential pattern using different colors of ballast to make this more of something visually to look down upon. I think it's important to also note the way that this roof is being designed is you will not see rooftop equipment here, mechanical equipment. I mean, there will be the things like drains, as an example, and vent pipes and stacks and that sort of thing. But in terms of what you see here of an uncluttered roof, this is representative of what we are driving towards. This is a view from 3rd Street looking at the pavilion. Again, this is the portal that sort of matches the portal off of facing Public Square. And so this is this very strong connection between Public Square and then through to the tower. This is a view from West Roadway. So to give you a little orientation here. So here's the pavilion, obviously the tower, and what you see here is the Sky Bridge connection over to the parking garage. I'll be the first to say that elevations sometimes are very difficult to read, but we've included them mainly to give you a sense of the scale and the proportion of obviously the pavilion here, but of the tower as well. So again, what you're looking at here is the east elevation, the main entry. And this is a detail, and it's in the submission. But this gives you, and I'm not going to go through all of these notes here, but it gives you a sense of the composition of the elevation and the materiality. And in this case, it's highlighting one of the terraces here on the east side of the pavilion overlooking Public Square. And then as we move around, this is the south elevation, and then the west elevation. And so the rendering you saw earlier with this portal going into the entry pavilion, and then this is the pedestrian bridge that connects between the pavilion and the tower. And then the north elevation. And what you're seeing here, particularly on the upper level, is the center of excellence. The pavilion has two major functions: center of excellence, which is really about telling the Sherwin-Williams story and the history of Sherwin-Williams, and learning and development. So what you're seeing here is learning and development, and then the lower portion here. Some portions of this building, both the pavilion and the tower, and this is a good example, where we've got solid wall here. And typically what that means is we have mechanical equipment that's behind that wall. It's important to note that neither the pavilion nor the tower has a basement where oftentimes that equipment could be located. So that's what you're seeing here, and you're seeing some of the louvers there for the mechanical system. And then going around, again, this is a typical pavilion facade. And then a model view from the south. So let's talk about the tower. And I'm going to show these initial renderings. And what you're going to be seeing here is obviously the tower in the context of the city. A little difficult to read here, but these images have the incorporation of the signage here at the top of the tower. Oops. So this is the view from the Detroit Superior Bridge. Again, from Public Square. And this is a series of elevations, which I think give you a good understanding of the size and the proportion of the tower. And as we'll see here in the lighting in a few minutes, the importance of that vertical slot in terms of the proportions, the aspect ratio of the overall tower and how it breaks down. The enclosure of the tower is a system that has a basic, what we refer to as a chassis here. And this is sort of the component from which these various components of the curtain wall are in effect built from. And what's different here, and I won't go through each of these, is a condition, it could be in terms of the floor-to-floor height, is higher in certain areas, a conference area as an example, or the exterior material. But this is all part of a larger curtain wall system that is very much integrated. It's integrated from a technical standpoint, but visually as well. This is a view of the tower lobby, what you're sort of looking at from this angle right here. And this is a view back towards the pavilion, Key Tower obviously in the background here. But you can start to get a sense of this lobby in terms of being light-filled, but very open on 3rd Street. an elevation of that lobby. So this right here represents the lobby. And then this is a rendering of actually what we're talking about here relative to the lobby. And this is an example of a project that we recently completed in Cambridge that has a similar type of system. And then this is the south elevation along Superior. So this is the walkway here connecting the parking to the west over to 3rd Street, and then the pavilion. Excuse me. And this is a detail, actually, we went back here, of the main entry here off of Superior. So you can get a sense of what the size and proportion of that is. And this would be, give you a sense of scale to people. Thank you so much, Nancy. This is the a view of the west and south parking lot, specifically the west elevation. So what you're looking at here is this elevation here. The lower level of the tower and the podium is very intensive from a mechanical standpoint. There's a lot of equipment that's happening at that ground level. And then this is the north elevation. And specifically, the elevation along Frankfurt. I mentioned about the materials here. These are obviously images of those materials. But to give you a sense of what's happening at the base of the tower, the tower and the pavilion are sitting on a plinth. And that plinth, in terms of, if it's not glass, this is limestone. And then the very base that actually is sort of touching the sidewalk would be this granite here, which is we've used on numerous projects and is exceedingly durable. I mentioned about the tower signage. This gives you a sense of the scale. This is about 94 feet long. So, I mean, it's going to be very prominent. It'll be white during the days, and it'll be during the day and illuminated at night. That's what's being proposed. And that leads us into the tower lighting. I mentioned the slot here on each side of the building, on the east and west sides. And so what we're proposing from a lighting standpoint is actually accentuating that slot. And so it has a very distinctive profile on the skyline. Of course, we're using LED lighting, and what this is showing is a range of ideas that could be done, whether it's Veterans Day or celebrating pride or breast cancer awareness or Sherwin-Williams. There's just an infinite number of options relative to that. And then finally, the pavilion and the lighting there. There is as you can see here around this portal, the main entry, the front door, that will be accentuated. It will also be LED. It will also have the flexibility in terms of color and intensity, and then highlighting the brow as it wraps around the pavilion. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to my friend Matt to go through the garage.
Thank you, Bill. So really, the garage is an extension of the campus. The materiality specifically along West 3rd Street is an extension of the materiality of the office tower. Here's a larger image that shows the garage in context to the office tower to the south. You can see a similar curtain wall system that is proposed on the tower, limestone, the introduction of vision glass, spandrel glass, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a rendering of the intersection on down vacated Frankfurt and the interplay of the garage to the office tower across the pedestrian skyway.
you start to pick up how these limestone vertical elements start to set up a typical residential bay, retail bay, how a retail signage band is integrated into the base of the parking structure. And then the overall materiality. So what we will have is the first floor of the parking structure does have a retail liner. It's approximately 1,600 square feet. It would be, at this point, it could be one tenant, it could be two tenants. It's probably too small to have three separate tenants. So the doors into those spaces would be determined based on the retail users that go into those spaces. But essentially, we have ground level entrances to retail bays, a typical retail width, a typical sign band, and the limestone vertical elements as we had in the office tower across the way. One of our conditions of approval for the garage at schematic design was to research the height of the retail space specifically and prove out that the available area that we have within the retail space is viable for use. We do have 13'2" from floor to floor. That would result in approximately a 12-foot clear area in the front half of that retail bay. The retail bay is 18.5 feet deep. So theoretically, smaller bank branches, barbershops, things like that could function very well in a space like this with a 12-foot ceiling height. What we're showing in this diagram is essentially what could happen with a front of house and essentially a back of house if need be, where we could take mechanicals and sneak them under the bottom of the beam, the structural beam that is approximately 10'4" above finished floor, get the mechanicals underneath that beam and still have large open retail space within the front part of that building. Just a high level, a detailed shot of the materiality. Again, the vision glass, the limestone panels, the granite base as Bill had mentioned, and then the mullion covers. This is a shot down vacated Frankfurt. As Tim had mentioned, at schematic design, we had proposed some sort of a perforated metal panel that would incorporate street art. That art is still to be determined. We're working with Sherwin-Williams. Sherwin-Williams is having conversations with Land Studio about what that art could be. We're in early conversations, I should clarify, with Land Studio about that. But essentially, the facade on Frankfurt is, again, it is an open parking structure. It needs to breathe, and it's a combination of perforated metal panel up above. We do have exposed cast-in-place concrete elements on our vertical elements, structural elements. There are mullion cap details, profile details that cover the cast-in-place columns above street level. There's a form liner, a freeze kind of form liner panel in the cast-in-place concrete that's happening at the street level above the pedestrian level. And then above, again, this combination of open perforated metal panels. Just a detail of what that perforation might be. Another condition of our approval at schematic was to research the temporary facade treatments along the north and the west facades of the parking structure. This would be the sides of the parking structure that would look into essentially the future development. One of those conditions was to study how we could treat those facades if future development did not come into play prior to occupancy of this building. And what we've done is we've found a material. It has been used locally out at Crocker Park. It is also being used by our architect of record partner, HGA and Associates, on some projects that they've done for the FBI. It is essentially it's a woven scrim material. It's a fabric material that would be stretched to fill in the parking bays above. So essentially at the ground level, we again have cast in place with a form liner, decorative element. We have a expanded metal security mesh to keep folks out of the garage at the pedestrian level. Again, this is not pedestrian, this is facing the parking lots around it. And then from the first floor up, we would have the scrim material. Our intention is, I would say, most closely resembling this image of FBI Milwaukee. The material comes in different colors. You can change those colors. You can create patterns. At this point in time, our proposal is to create a simple horizontal banding pattern that creates some interest on that garage facade. This is a shot from the corner of West 6th Street in St. Clair, looking back at the garage. And then the dashed in magenta lines would be representative of future development that would show that that garage would go away in the future development condition. We're going to talk about, Nelson Nygaard's going to speak briefly about the traffic study.
Good afternoon. So we've been working on this traffic study for about 6 weeks now in collaboration with our partners at Sherwin and the consulting team, as well as input from the City of Cleveland's engineering department. We expect to have the final report to you all by the end of this week. But our initial findings are we don't expect any major impacts to traffic around the site. There's plenty of capacity there right now. The two major changes are the closure of Frankfurt and the addition of the new garage. But we think that it'll fit in very well within the existing street network. The only area of concern potentially would be traffic northbound on West 6th coming from West Superior. But we think that can be mitigated by changes to traffic signaling. Make sure I got everything. And right now, the analysis is very conservative. It does not take into account the changes from the removal of all the surface parking lots. Basically, we're moving from a configuration where traffic is being released from multiple points around that block to one or two central locations. In many ways, that makes it much easier to manage from a congestion point of view, that we can basically kind of move traffic through faster, and there's less incidents of conflict for people walking, biking, or driving. And again, we'll have that final report by the end of this week. Thank you.
Now we can talk a little bit about landscape and some of the developments that we have made with the project. I know that a lot of the concerns and some of the questions have been revolved around creating walkable corridors and pedestrian corridors. And so I think as we have looked at the project, and since we've met last time, we had a great meeting with the city arborist, and we've been making some adjustments and really looking at the perimeter. To me, the thing I think that is going to really make this development successful and a great addition to the city, as we walk around on some of the adjacent blocks, and as I look at cities, when we work on projects like this, they're often void of street trees. And so what we've done is we've looked at balancing kind of on this north block the existing trees that are in place right now. We're also looking at keeping some of the street trees that are adjacent to Public Square. And then where we don't have street trees, we're really trying to enhance those. So we've added, as Tim was talking about, we're looking at this 3-bay parking garage right now. That allows for expandability. In the interim, where we have the surface parking, we've added some additional trees into that block. Where we have the tower block, we've added, again, additional trees. We've kept some of the trees that are on 6th West, and then we've supplemented those. And then with that buffer zone that's along the parking, it's allowed us to add a second row. And so on 6th Street, in a lot of locations, we kind of have this alley of trees that you can walk down. And then as we start to look at West Superior, again, we have this kind of double row of trees, and then we get into the tower. And then again, along the pavilion block, as we move towards Public Square, we have this very walkable corridor here, and then we have this kind of adjacent urban space that kind of extends that the Public Square. So some of the enlarged plans, I know we talked about this potentially moving, so that'll allow us to continue to look at reinforcing, the planting that is on Frankfurt. Right now, we have a sidewalk that's on both the south and on the north. It's a little bit more generous on the north. And I think as we see the parking garage come in and the tower, that this connection is going to feel much more natural as opposed to kind of walking through two parking lots right now. And I think that'll strengthen that connection to the warehouse district. We also have a gate that holds, and then at each of the corners for walkability, we have enhancements in the paving. As we start to look at the office tower block, we again kind of reinforce the paving at some of the key entrances where people will be entering the building. So we see that as a concrete unit paver that'll be complementary to the color scheme that Bill talked about with this kind of darker granite kind of meeting the ground plane. And then some elements of security and then enhanced planting that finds its way adjacent to the tower, around the perimeter of the parking, and then planters that are kind of along 3rd West. As we look at the pavilion block, I think it's really great. You know, Public Square has done a lot in terms of connecting people, and I think pulling this back and kind of connecting into this kind of larger urban move where we kind of have the circle that's formed and people walking and cutting through in a lot of different directions. I think we'll start to see a lot of people finding their way through this kind of great garden space. As Tim was talking about, you know, you'll get this view that comes through to Public Square. We have the garden here, again, enhanced pavings at each of those entrances into the building. And then again, kind of on Superior and West Street, we have kind of that double row of street trees that find their way there. And then these next few renderings just start to show, you know, what the character of that space might be. We've been talking with the team and starting to look at some of the plant materials. We've included those in our package. We've been looking at, you know, what are the right street trees. So we've been looking at red oaks. What are some of the other ones, Andrew? We had the, oh, that's right. We had the red oak and the elm, and then we had hawthorn and birch as maybe some of the trees that accentuate some of the garden spaces with a little bit of color in there. We know around some of the parking areas that will incorporate evergreens just to keep that screening. But this is kind of looking at this color garden kind of as this forecourt at the pavilion space. And then some of the lawn areas that flank on the sides. And then this is along Superior Street. So we have kind of this generous sidewalk in here. We have this double row of trees and then another walk adjacent to the building. And then enhanced plantings that are adjacent to that wall. And then looking up 3rd Street. And this connection coming across, and then this layering of materials with the plants, the pavings, and the street trees. And then this is kind of the key entry, showing some of the elements of security here, low wall plantings, and then this connectivity. And then this is this experience that I think, you know, with the addition of the parking garage and the tower, and then additional developments, I think we'll see this Frankfurt corridor really start to make sense from Public Square to the warehouse district, and then some of the trees that we're looking at and have talked about, and then some of the plant materials that we've been working through. And then we'll talk a little bit about lighting. So lighting that we're looking at around the site, we're looking at keeping some of the existing poles that are on kind of the north block and along 6th, and then enhancing those with some lighting for the surface lots, some kind of street lights, some area lights that we'll find kind of in the plaza area that give us the ability to highlight certain areas or focus pedestrians in a certain way. As we look at kind of the gardens in here, we're really looking to have kind of a lower light level in here. I think oftentimes with lighting, we have too much light. So controlling that and keeping it on the ground plane we think is going to be really important. And then we have, you know, a few other kind of at-grade fixtures for uplighting some of the elements. I think that's our last slide. So with that, we'll turn it back to Tim.
Thanks. Great. Well, that's all we've got for our presentation, and so turn it over to the chair.
You're going to be leaving, and Jack, you're going to be taking over with design reviews, going to be stepping in, so give us about 5 minutes so we can reshuffle, and then Jack will do his job, and then we'll come after Jack. Good.
Thank you. 5-minute recess.
combined meeting of the Historic Downtown Design Review and the Downtown Flats Design Review meeting, and I will ask for the roll to be called.
Yes. Bialowski.
Present.
Benton. Bogart. Boyd. Brown. Geist.
Here.
Long. O'Connell.
Here.
Parker.
Present.
Pisarcik. Schwartzberg. Solstice. Vanderweel. Yablonsky. Zarfos. Zarnes. Mr. Chairman, we have quorum.
We have a quorum. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to read an email that has been sent not to all of the members of this design review panel, but some of them, which has been shared with Sherwin-Williams. I also want to say that there have been a number of informal conversations that have taken place both with staff and with me since the schematic presentation has been made, and I'm actually very pleased to see the response to those conversations and the way that many of the things that have been discussed with staff have been reflected in the changes that you have shown us this morning. So I commend you for that, and I thank you for it. A number of the items that are in this email have already been addressed this morning, but I want to get through them so that the panel can ask about those things that remain to be of interest of them. So, yes, and I can take my mask off, and that'll make a difference. I apologize for that. Design review colleagues, in advance of the Sherwin-Williams meeting, here are a few thoughts for consideration. The agenda, again, has very limited time for review of an expansive project, and I know that we have all been feeling time constrained and a bit frustrated that such a significant project is given such a short amount of time for review. I want to make sure that we can cover all the things that the panel wants to be addressed while balancing both the desire to keep the project moving and to protect the public interest for what will be a far-reaching, impactful, and long-lasting intervention in the public realm, hopefully mostly, if not entirely, for the good. To that end, I'm proposing to organize some comments to cover the larger issues, and especially the ones that have the most impact on the public, particularly the pedestrian realm. Attached are comments from the Historic District review of the submittal, and everyone has seen that email. These comments will not be new to Sherwin-Williams designers, as most of them have been reviewed in one form or another with Matt Heisey and or Bill Chilton, with both of whom there have been several informal conversations since the last formal meeting. While it is important to keep the project moving forward, I do not want the panel to feel pressure that it is all or nothing, and that if there are concerns that are not adequately addressed in the meeting, know that we can remove them from any motions to approve as conditions for later revision and review. The design and construction of this project is a very large before they will be ready for construction. So let us remind those things that are important to us are satisfactorily addressed. There have been 23 public comments received reflect concerns about bird safety. This is obviously a big concern reflected by the amount of mail on the subject. Bill Chilton was made aware of these concerns a month ago and has indicated that this is an issue with which his firm has experience in addressing. This morning we heard that there's an avian consultant that has been retained by Sherwin-Williams. This is primarily an issue for the lower 70 feet of the building facade, and we will see if their measures are deemed appropriate by asking the proper authorities. However, I do not want the meeting to spend an inordinate amount of time, of our limited time, on this subject, so we will keep moving. These glass features will be a point of discussion. The other two comments reflect disappointment, which we share, in the lack of adequate time for review, take issue with the scale of the pavilion, which we will not revisit, don't approve of the temporary surface lots, which we will not revisit, ask if the landscaping in front of the pavilion is open to the public, which I believe we heard this morning. We can infer from the landscape architect's comments that it is, and about coordination of landscaping with bus stops, which I think is fair game to be answered. There are several issues raised in the attached memo regarding architectural detailing. Some of these we should visit as they relate to specifics of climate and appropriate material usage at the ground level. And again, this morning we heard about the use of granite at the base of this building, which is a suitable material for dealing with the salt issues and the other winter conditions. And some of which, such as copings at the top of the glass, I personally believe are best left to the architects who have significant experience in detailing high-quality buildings of this nature. We'll feel our way through these. I think we should spend the bulk of our time talking about Frankfurt and the pedestrian experience, which is depicted with some discrepancies in the renderings and is not quite yet satisfactory. This relates both to the nature of the facades, particularly the north facade of the tower, which is blank and uninviting, has big truck bays, as well as the Frankfurt garage. I've discussed the streetscape on the north side of Frankfurt with Matt Heisey and pointed out that there are mature trees there now and that there is room to the north of the garage to pull it back to the north, leaving these trees in place. The last renderings I saw are not accurate in depicting this condition. The landscape plan shows only bushes, which in my view are inadequate. This morning we heard from Tim Muckley that they are prepared to move the garage further to the north by 5 feet. Don't know if we don't have Tom Zarfos this morning, do we?
No, we don't.
So this is a point that we need to discuss. We have not heard about results from Nelson Nygaard regarding the traffic studies. This afternoon we did hear about that, and that traffic report is going to be delivered to us this week. I think that and Nelson Nygaard is telling us that the impact on surrounding traffic is minimal. I think we need to see what that traffic report says, and if the engineering department in the city is okay with it, then I think we ought to be as well. I'll move on. We've also noted the lack of an amenity plan or public art program both on Frankfurt and at the Pavilion Plaza, which I know the designers want to address. We've encouraged them to engage Land Studio to oversee a program. I think this morning we heard that they are in touch with them, but I don't know what those arrangements are. We have not seen integrated signage at the pedestrian level. So these are the major issues I intend to outline and request a response. If you have others, please let me know. I did hear from Tom Zarfos. Thank you for your patience with what is admittedly a flawed process, as well as for your continued thoughtful consideration. So let us talk about Frankfurt to begin with, if we can. And I'd like to ask the landscape architect exactly how much room there is for tree planting. My understanding is that the mature trees which are there, and which we have a photograph with us here, would require the garage to be moved back further than is really practical, about 20 feet more.
That's correct. So in the last plan that you saw, we had 5 feet. We have moved it an additional 5 feet, so we have 10 feet
Do you have 10 feet of landscaping?
We have 10 feet of landscaping now behind the sidewalk. So where the sidewalk is, we have conflicts with the utilities. So we've looked at pushing that to the north, which will now allow us to add trees along that alignment.
So how big can those trees be when you put them in?
We've discussed 100-gallon trees.
I don't know what caliper is that?
So that would be a 3 to 4 inch caliper tree in the
my view, that is,
15 to
that's not adequate.
18 foot range.
I think a 3 to 4 inch caliper tree is going to take a long time to get to the point where it's going to be meaningful to us. And I wonder whether, I don't have expertise in this area. I know that's not big enough. I wonder if we could defer to the city arborist or if anyone else does have that expertise.
That'd be about 15 feet.
No? Okay.
So
Well,
the canopy on that tree would be about 15 feet in height. That would give you a clear height of about 6 to 7 feet.
Yeah, I think it should be bigger than that, and I think this is the time to push for that, but we'll come back to that condition at a later date.
Okay.
What about the, we saw that you have lighting plan for the park, but we didn't see anything about benches, trash cans, bike racks, any other level of public amenities. Is that something that you are planning to have that we'll get to see at some future point?
Yes.
And relative to the scrim design that will be on the garages, is that something, and I would ask Director Collier, is that, or Anthony, is that something that the actual, whatever is on that it has to come back to design review for the actual design that might be on it? Hopefully it will be something colorful that is Sherwin-Williams-y, reflecting the nature of your business.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond to that. So we do have requirements for public art. If it will be an artistic element that is illustrated as a public art piece, we do have the authority to see that. So that is something that could come back to us for us to take a look at.
Okay, well, the nice thing about the scrim is that it allows the garage to remain open and free air breathing, and yet it's going to provide something attractive for the public, whether a building is built in front of it or not. And you can print on it, so I think it's a good solution. Is the landscaping irrigated?
Yes, we will be irrigating the landscape.
I particularly appreciate the second row of trees that you've been able to provide at those surface parking lots. This was one of the things that Tom Zarfos mentioned in his email to me this morning. And he was hoping, I don't know whether there's fencing around those lots as well.
So we do have fencing around the lots as
And
well.
is the nature of that fencing, is there an opportunity for that to be something artistic, or is it just utilitarian? Or don't we know yet?
Currently, it's utilitarian.
Is that something that Sherwin-Williams might be open to enhancing?
Are you talking about the fencing around the parking lot?
Yes.
Yeah, I think right now it's the standard black wrought iron fencing, but I mean, we would be open to suggestions if there's something different that, I mean, obviously we have an interest in wanting to create a barrier.
Of course.
Between what's public and what's private, but I don't know that we have a strong feeling one way or another.
Well, it was a suggestion of Mr. Zarfos that it might be an opportunity, maybe at the entries or some other places, for an artistic expression that would make the pedestrian experience a little better. And Tim, while you're up, can you tell us what the situation is with Land Studio?
Actually, Julie Young
Julie,
has been
okay.
having conversations with Land.
Yeah, we've had a couple of initial conversations with them, and they've shared some examples and some initial proposals that we are now looking at, and that's about as far as it's gotten, but we definitely have a desire to engage with them.
Super. Okay.
And just one other thing with that, I know that part of that too, that whole concept is we're trying to develop an overall branding plan for the interior, the exterior, everything. So I think that, what we would do on the scrim or something with public art, we'd want to also tie in with an overall branding plan.
So the other thing that we have not seen yet that I presume and hope that you will have is pedestrian level signage. The only signage that we've really seen is what is proposed on the tower. And that together with the lighting, I think is going to be a great landmark for the city. But I'm wondering, what else is to come?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, we've talked about, would there be potentially a monument sign at, the corner of Superior and West 6, same thing as you kind of come off of Frankfurt, some type of signage there. And for sure, somewhere in that very front of that pavilion off of Public Square, we'd have some type of pedestrian level signage. And again, we're working through that, and we didn't present that today because we weren't ready. We know that there were requests to show the signage on the tower, and we wanted to make sure we got that out in front of you, but we still have a lot of work to do on the overall signage.
Sure. I wonder whether Matt or Bill could address the north facade of the street level at Frankfurt on the tower, and whether there is any opportunity. You have truck bays there. Are the trucks entirely inside the building with the doors down when they're in the bays? And is there any opportunity to do anything along that wall that will make that a better pedestrian experience, understanding that what's behind it is not anything you want to be looking at?
Right. Well, specifically relative to the loading dock, it is an enclosed loading dock. It will accommodate the vast majority of vehicles, 73-foot truck. It cannot accommodate completely inside, but that represents maybe 2 or 3 deliveries a week.
And how wide are all of those bays together? And the reason I'm asking is, do you think that all the pedestrians are going to go to the north side of Frankfurt, or will people be walking across there, and will they feel like they're walking, on a sidewalk intended for pedestrians, or in an area that is, basically truck dock?
Right. Jarek, would you like to address that from a landscape standpoint?
I mean, I think clearly the north side, we have a wider sidewalk. We're looking at pushing the garage and getting trees in there. Size to be determined. We do have a sidewalk on the south side as well.
But no planting on that side?
We do not have planting along that alignment. It's a little bit tighter.
And just to clarify too, our preference would be to try to direct people to the north side.
I think they'll want to go there
Yeah.
because of the shadow of the building.
Obviously, we want to try to minimize the amount of pedestrian and truck traffic crossing over. So to the extent that we can get people to the north side, the only on the north side is the entry to the garage. And that will basically be used primarily first thing in the morning, as people are coming in. By 10 o'clock, there should be very little traffic. So hopefully people will come to the north and be able to, traverse the north side.
Well, I'm opening up to the panel. I want to recognize Rick Parker first.
Excuse me, I just want to respond to the question on the width.
Sure.
Yeah, so this total width out, inclusive obviously of the doors, is about 75 feet.
75 feet.
But it's also including the walls on the ends.
Okay. Rick?
Thank you. So since we're on this subject, I would be inclined to walk on the north side. I would agree with that kind of approach. However, then I'm going to be looking at that building as opposed to walking by it. So I think the question of what can be done here is still relevant and important. It could be as simple, in my mind, as lighting. I don't know if you've been down Johnson Court, in the warehouse district. There's some small little light fixtures that create an interesting pattern on the building there, combination of variety of fixtures, but there's a couple there that are really, they're interesting, they're different, and they create this whole kind of rhythm that you can achieve here. Even that, which again goes back to Jack's comment that we really don't have a lot of detail on the lighting, things like that would help. And then, maybe you do break with your standard palette and do something a little bit more with some of those panels below the windows. I don't know. But create some interest visually. I understand fully what's behind it, and you've got to keep a pretty flat wall there to make everything work inside. I totally respect that, so it's not a comment on that. But since we're going to look at it as we're walking, then I think there's more that can be done. And while I have the pulpit here for a moment.
Please go ahead, Rick.
I'll
It's
finish
fine.
all my points and
Yeah.
then I'll be out of it.
No,
So the other just kind of clarification, and speaking on behalf of the downtown design review, I can't speak on behalf of Flats. When we talk about the pedestrian experience, it's not the same as walkability. Walkability is the ability to get from A to B without obstructions and smooth pavement and all that stuff. Great, that's part of it. But the experience is what we're starting to talk about here, that Jack raised several comments and that I'm trying to reinforce. So, I'd like to make sure that's very clear with everybody. It's not the same as walkability. Experience is a three-dimensional, personal, from the heart. What are we doing here and how are we going to experience this place?
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Yablonsky.
I think Rick's commentary is a good segue into what I wanted to ask about. And this perspective comes from being involved in the warehouse district for 36 years. The block you're filling in, it's fantastic that finally it's being filling in, but the history of that block has some great things that have been there in the past. So one of the projects you're mentioning in very early embryonic stages, Land Studio, I just want to expand that argument a little bit, or that thought a little bit. The warehouse district already has a public art program called Anthology. There are 5 anthologies that tell the history of certain aspects of that district. We had proposed a 6th anthology in this block when the Asher family was still going to develop it as a mixed-use block. But the relevance of what to put here is still the same as it was when the Ashers controlled it. And that is, this is the block that had maybe one of the grandest buildings of Cleveland of the 19th century, the Powerhouse, or the Blackstone block. It had 2 names. Also, the Academy Theater was in this block, which has a great national history to it. So we had designed in concept an anthology piece that would talk about the past, but what's happening in the present and what could happen in the future. So obviously your development fills in those last 2 thoughts. So I would just throw out the thought to work with the Downtown Cleveland Alliance and the Warehouse District, compatible with a Land Studio involvement, but without going into too much detail, really look at the anthology as an opportunity to really make this a special place and pedestrian experience. The other thing I want to add about that is we hadn't decided whether it made more sense to be on Frankfurt or St. Clair. So I see you've pushed the buildings where St. Clair has a much wider sidewalk. Given that you did that, I don't know if you could shift that slightly where still maybe Frankfurt has more space. I don't know if that makes sense, or we think the public art should be more on St. Clair. But either or. I just want to make you aware of that project and hope it's the thoughts behind it get integrated into your
This
long-term
sounds like
thinking.
something that would be a really good story that could be told on a long blank wall and make it not so boring, and something that's really interesting that is of that place, that could be unique. So,
And Jack, the existing anthologies are a design public art structure that tells the stories, like the books of it was called
Sure.
Anthology, like it's books of a page, pages of a book.
thank you, Tom. Other comments from the panel? Concerns? Don't leave me hanging, guys. Go ahead, Krista.
Well, we're talking about walkability and the pedestrian experience. I also want to piggyback on that comment from Frankfurt, but also I think it should apply to Superior. I see that you're adding street trees to enhance what's already there, but I'd ask maybe if there's a way to take it a step farther. A lot of buses do queue up there. It is a very stark experience right now, and
Yeah, because they're going to move.
you know, as
this.
someone who has waited for a bus there or walked down there my share of times, I would hope that you would want to make that better. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of your employees that are going to be taking those buses, and so to enhance that waiting environment and that pedestrian experience would go a long way.
So along the superior facade of the tower, we do have large display windows that the displays that are going in those windows need to be programmed, need to be designed, need to be finalized. There's absolutely an opportunity to tell a story, whether in concert with Warehouse District or as a branding expression of Sherwin-Williams. Our intention is that those windows would be programmed in that way.
Are those going to be rotating periodically, or will they kind of
Like
be pretty
physically
stagnant?
rotating?
No, like just like changing out.
But we're not that far in our development, but essentially, yes, they could be.
Can you tell us with a little more specificity what your conversations with the avian consultant have been and what the plans are for making the building bird safe?
Sure.
Yeah, I can address that, Bill. So we met with our avian consultant again yesterday and had some discussions, and really trying to look at developing a strategy about how do we minimize these bird strikes, or the potential for bird strikes. And, you know, their approach was really more an outside-in approach. So, you know, what can we do to not attract, you know, birds to the site? What, you know, birds are attracted by nesting areas, they're attracted by food sources, and by light. So looking at, you know, what we can do with the lighting, especially during migratory periods, in order to not make it an attractive place. Making sure that, you know, we clean up, keep the trash cleaned up around the site. They mentioned that actually street vendors end up kind of being a place where also birds tend to gather. So there's some things that we can do exterior, you know, as not attracting to the site. As far as, you know, you're still going to have birds at the site. So one of the other issues is, you know, how do we not attract them into the building? And there's some decals that you can put on the windows. There's lighting, ways that you can light the inside. There's blinds that can come down. There's, I mean, they've given us a variety of different operational things that we can do to try to minimize birds wanting to get inside. One of those is removing the greenery from anywhere near the windows. Because, of course, you know, birds are attracted to that right off the bat. So we've basically are having them develop an operational plan for us to say, all right, what do we need to do to try to minimize these? They also talked about a post-construction plan that basically is where you are identifying or, inspecting, documenting, and then adjusting. So in other words, you have a plan where you kind of know where your hot spots are. Mm-hmm. You inspect on a routine basis to see if there's bird strikes or dead birds. Document what times of the year, document what type of bird, and then, you know, create hot spots, and then look at other ways of either putting up netting or putting up frits on the glass, different things that we can do to try to you know, alleviate that.
It's interesting. It seems that the most critical area actually is the park area in front of the pavilion, which has the most green in it.
Yep.
And which obviously is in the interest of the public to keep. So, you know, what you do with that glass at those locations, what decals you put on it or film or whatever it is that you do, shades, are you planning to have shades?
Yeah, different places on here will definitely have shades. Some of them will be self-automated. Mm-hmm. So we can look at ways to control those, control the lighting. Mm-hmm. You know, we have had conversations with Lights Out Cleveland to understand, you know, the migratory periods. So there's a lot of things where I think we can work with and figure out how to minimize, you know, bird collisions. And, the high-rise itself only accounts for less than 1% of the bird mortalities. And it is really the lower level and the pavilion that we're going to
And
be more
that was
focused on.
reinforced by the correspondence that we got as well. Director Collier, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I just want to say, appreciate the attention to it. It is, we believe, a relevant issue, and it's something that we're going to pay more attention to. I will be the first to say, honestly, I'm not an expert in the subject matter. I do appreciate the Audubon Society for submitting not just the concern, but also sharing research and very pertinent information for us to look at in the future. I do want to say, regardless of whether they strike low or high or whatever that percentage is, addressing the issue matters. And I'm thinking that just based on what you said, because there was a lot of complex stuff in there that you talked about, but the way this was articulated, it was such that there may just be something like UV reflective coating or something simple that can help address this. So let's keep it simple and let's keep it elegant, but we do want to make sure that it's addressed. It's something that we do want to take seriously moving forward.
I didn't know anything about this issue before about 2 months ago, and I've learned a lot about it in the past. And it is complicated. There's a lot of things that you can do. Maybe it doesn't 100% eliminate bird strikes, but it's things that you can do to minimize them.
Yeah.
The point that Tim just raised, for instance, interior landscaping, that's something that it sort of minimize that. And if you do have it, don't light it at night. So I use that as an example merely to underscore the operational aspects of this that are very important, as well as the monitoring that Tim talked about. And then certainly the design considerations as well.
Thank you, Bill. I want to ask Mark, Dennis, Tom, Alan, anyone else wants to weigh in on any subject, any concerns. Go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I love trees. Dennis, go to the microphone. I could project. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I love trees and I love attractive landscaping. But if they're not maintained in an urban environment, they're going to go wild and they're going to be quite unattractive very quickly. And if you look around downtown, you can see that in many locations. One of the best examples of where the landscaping is maintained nicely is over at Progressive Field. So what I'm wondering is, once you've come up with this plan, which I'm sure will be very attractive and go nicely with the different structures, who will maintain them? Will it be Sherwin-Williams, or will that be the responsibility of the city? I think that's really key.
Private property, it's Sherwin-Williams is the answer.
Yeah, we would be maintaining those, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look down at our Breen Technical Center down by the river. I mean, we got a lot of landscaping there, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Actually, I have, and I'm very impressed by that. The only other question I have at this point, and Mark and I think Mark actually brought it up, what type of material what kind of pavers, or are you looking at colored concrete around the site?
So in many of the sidewalk areas,
yes,
we're looking at regular concrete. It'll have a scoring pattern that has a relationship with the architecture, where we're near kind of the building entries.
And it will be
both for the tower.
It will be tinted to the appropriate color, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really important, because if you look at the Huntington Bank building, or if you look at Key Tower, they've had granite pavers there from the start, and it's extremely high maintenance. They crack. If they're not maintained about every other year, pretty soon they look pretty bad. They start to settle, and so I think you're on the right track there. As long as you've got good guys that prepare the surface properly, and you get the right tint and then the right cuts, I think that could go very nicely.
Do you consider mica fleck?
Have we considered microfleck?
Mica fleck, something
flecks.
to make that sidewalk sparkle.
We have not talked about that yet, but that's something we can consider.
Mark, any comments?
Just a couple things, and I want to get into the weeds a little bit, so bear with me. I didn't see you've got transparent glazing, but not spandrel glass. Is there a particular color you're going to use for that?
We
We do have spandrel glass. And what we're trying to do is, what we will do, is have the glass specification for the vision glass and the spandrel glass, tune that so it is, you don't see the banding of the spandrel glass. And so the tower itself appears much more uniform.
How is that done? By putting the coloring on an interior surface of the
Yeah, it's the glass and the makeup of that part of the curtain wall itself. Yes, but that's the design intent.
Okay. A couple other minor things. You mentioned the granite at the base. In your elevations, you're showing metal corners on the columns running down to grade. I would suggest you stop it and have the granite continue through there so you don't have metal meet the grade.
Yes.
Okay. And the last thing, can you talk a little bit about the roof structure? I know Jack mentioned that you guys will develop that, but if this is our last opportunity to hear what you're doing, I'd like to hear what you're doing.
In terms of just what?
Just in terms of closing it off, because the renderings show basically the structure supporting the glazing. I assume it's glazing up there, but it's exposed, and if there's, the Goodyear blimp or something going over it, it looks like it wants to be more finished than that.
Well, two very practical considerations that have to be accommodated. One is mechanical equipment, and another is what's referred to as the building management unit, or the unit that will wash the building, that needs to have, access around the building. And so there is, I would say, can we close that off? That would be exceedingly challenging. Part of this, in terms of the design, if you're looking straight down on it, fair comment. But in terms of the height of this, in terms of concealing what's behind it, that's a primary objective.
I think our main objective relative to this is what can be seen from the ground and from other buildings as opposed to from an airplane. I mean, you can see all kinds of equipment, looking down from an airplane. And we have seen a lot of other buildings in which the glass extends beyond that, and it's actually quite elegant. We were talking about a building that Picard Chilton designed in Atlanta that I have seen. It's really quite beautiful, and I'm sure it's weather safe.
Well, I mean, if the structure itself is enclosed, if you pull up one of your renderings, you'll see what I'm talking about. You just see framework. It doesn't look three-dimensional. It looks like signage of some sort. The view's looking down on it. From there, you can't see it. Yeah, when you're looking down on the tower, there's renderings that are kind of bird's eye views.
It may have been in this middle. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what sheet it would be.
This presentation is a summation of what's in there. So.
Well, if I just ask you to look at a way of making that look more finished than it appears in the renderings that I've seen.
Okay, understood. Understood.
Other, anyone else? Alan, anybody? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve this design with these conditions. That the traffic report is reviewed and approved by the city's engineering department. That the north facade of the tower building at the street level be studied for more visual interest, potentially with the anthology, public art anthology, History of the Block. That you coordinate the bus stops with your landscape plan, and that be submitted back to the city to show how that would work. And that your avian plan, an outline of an avian plan for how the building will be managed, how glass will be dealt with in these initial designs also be submitted to the city. Is anyone prepared to make such a motion? And
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I have it from Tom. Is there a second?
Second.
Hang on, where did the second come from?
I either made the motion or seconded. I'm not sure who did it.
Okay, Yablonsky is seconding a motion from Geis.
2 times.
Now I am opening this up for further question or comment. Mr. Parker.
Thank you. I'd like to add to the list a couple items. Coming back with basically a more complete or streetscape solution. We've got the basics, we understand the trees.
You're talking about benches, trash cans,
Right,
bike racks,
all the
amenity
amenities,
plan. Right.
And then also sidewalk patterns. The description sounds pretty boring, to be totally honest and candid. I'd like to hear about more creative options, particularly Superior and Frankfurt.
So let's call that an amenity plan, full amenity plan, street amenity plan, and sidewalk pattern.
Lighting, and more lighting.
And lighting plan included with that. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Geis?
Yes.
Mr. Yablonsky? Yes. Any other questions, comments, concerns, modifications? Hearing none, I would ask you to call the roll.
Bialowski.
Yay.
Benton. Geis.
Yay.
Long. O'Connell.
No.
Parker.
Yay.
Pisarcik.
Yes.
And Yablonsky.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. We're going to be taking a quick 5-minute recess for the next group, which is the commissions, to come in and do their deliberations, and we will proceed in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Do you need to stick around? Do you have those conditions?
Oh, yeah, we're good right here.
Okay.
Type them in here.
Okay. Because I'm probably going to go to that.
Calling the joint meeting to order. This is landmarks and planning. Freddie, will you call the roll, please?
Anderson. Here. Bailey.
Here.
Bonesi.
Here.
Bowen.
Present.
Kalikia. Collier here. Downey. Dreyer. Fluker.
Present.
Jones. Curry. McCray Scott. Paul. Slife. Strickland. Tarasic. Trot. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to questions first from the Landmarks and Planning Commission. But I just want to say I was talking to Jack on my way in, and he mentioned that they forgot to put in their motion about, as presented, you're moving the parking garage 5 feet farther away from the street, and then also about the larger caliper tree. So that's going to be part of the motion too. So Planning Commission, Landmarks, questions? Who's the first? Go ahead. You got to push it down hard.
The bridge, our walking perception as human beings, or even as birds, are very low in the spectrum of the universe. We don't walk up 3,000 feet. We're down. Okay. So my point is that item number one is the bridge, which is an opportunity, I think, to create something special and unique. Cleveland is famous for its bridges. In fact, I think they just renamed the Cleveland baseball team the Guardians. So that bridge that connects the two buildings would be an incredible opportunity to create something very visible, very interesting, and very creative. At one of the meetings, I mentioned the Bridge of Sighs in Venice, which, of course, is very dramatic. But the idea of the bridge is not really, historically speaking, is not to go from one place to another, but as a gathering place, as an architectural ally to the structure that it connects, So to me, and then to leave something like that, for example, to another entity such as Land Studio, I think architecture and art have been married from the beginning of time. So that's an architectural factor that should become also an artistic factor, that bridge should be a unique spot. You need something to look at as we walk under it or nearby. The other issue that I have is we've talked about walkability, we've talked about walkability and communication as far as public square is concerned. And one of my concerns is that the pavilion, which would be an amazing space for historical factors, perhaps. Sherwin-Williams has been in business for over a century, and I think its story would be interesting to share with the public. Because right now, if I'm seeing this correctly, in order to get from Public Square, for example, to West 3rd, you have to really walk around. You can't walk through the pavilion because it's closed off and it's considered private property. I think we brought that up earlier. So to create an element of a gallery, a public space, that doesn't really deter that space from being used for what is intended to be used right now, but to make it more public, more open, more historical, and more human-friendly, I think would be an interesting consideration.
And I just want to make sure I understood, to make what more public?
The pavilion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not just a private lobby, but perhaps a museum, a gathering place for the people in the building, but also for communicating and attaching it to public square, which is part of the community.
Actually, I'll defer to Tim and Matt on the second question. On the first one, relative to the
bridge,
to the Sky Bridge, I think it is it's an interesting point of discussion. I lived for many years in Minneapolis, which, as you know, in St. Paul, have a lot of sky bridges. And so I think the debate in part sort of can come down to, is the sky bridge, shall we say, sort of magnified in its visual importance, or is it more subtle? Or is there a way to have both? And what I mean by that is, I mean, clearly, we've had that debate internally within the project team, and we've elected to do something that's more quiet. But one of the things that we've talked about internally is there something that we can do with light, as an example, to have that be actually be an art piece in and of itself. So I think it's absolutely a fair question, but like I said, where we have come out on that is to just have it be more minimal. So anyway, I just wanted to respond to that. And on the second question,
I can talk about that.
Thank you.
Giancarlo, we didn't go into detail on this today, but the first floor of the pavilion, specifically the north side of the pavilion, is what is referred to as Sherwin-Williams Center of Excellence. It's their historical component, it tells their story. And while the Center of Excellence is not open to the public from the inside, it is the ground level experience all around the north side of the building is from grade to 15, 20 feet glass. We've talked about the Center of Excellence having an external projection so that the Center of Excellence could be experienced from the outside of the building. You could read the Sherwin-Williams story, you could understand what the color of the year is, you could understand all of these different things and the great storylines that we're developing as part of the brand narrative with Sherwin. So there is the ability to experience that as you migrate around the building in that area.
I want to emphasize the fact that color, dyes, the concept of coloring our lives is as ancient as human existence. They found, vats that go back 6,000 or 7,000 years, 8,000 years. And here we have, perhaps, I'm not sure, Sherwin-Williams is the largest painting company in the world or one of the largest or whatever, but it's an opportunity to somehow give honor to that tradition as we have. I mean, everything we're wearing right now has been colored in some form or other. So it's a very, very significant factor in our function as human beings, since we start walking the earth. So somehow to me, to honor that tradition and make it obvious and instructive to teach a future generation, I mean, it's an opportunity to teach, actually, is what I'm thinking of.
Just while you're on this slide, as you know, I've been most concerned with the, I guess, the retail activation of the barista to the street on the corner. I'll liken it to the fact that, like in Playhouse Square, where our offices are, if the Starbucks were not on the corner, it would be a really dead space, right? Or if it only opened internally. And I recognize that right now that Sherwin-Williams is not open to that idea of retailing that and wrapping the corner, so I understand that. But I wonder if the design of the glass or on either side, you might make provisions so in the future, if something were to change, that would be easily doable. Because I do think over time, the true activation of that corner is so essential to, it wraps the corner. And I mean, the example I'll use is that Playhouse Square example. I applaud everything you've done. I believe that all of the development and changes of this and what it's going to do for downtown and public square is extraordinary. So don't get me wrong, but I do think that long term that Sherwin-Williams may change their mind about that retail corner because it does wrap along Superior, which is really a kind of dead way of getting around there. So my compromise, I have a compromise. My compromise is to ask that you design the storefront system there, or whatever it's probably not storefront, or the system, so that easily on both sides there might be 2 bays that can convert down the line. And unfortunately, although I truly do love the landscaping that's developed on this corner, I think because there is landscaping that you've put up against the building there, it also prevents that from happening later too. But I wonder if you could make an accommodation to 2 bays, 1 on each side, both for the future. So could you speak to that?
Let me speak to that just a little bit. So we have left this open. I mean, right now, it would be access control.
No, I mean on the street side.
Correct.
These 2 bays, to not leave it now, but just to do something so down the line it would be very easy to punch doors into the system that you're putting there.
I would leave that to Matt, but I would think that anywhere in one of these bays that we would be able to put exterior access doors.
Accommodation could be made for future. Yes.
Like to design like the sill system or whatever system you're doing, so it's not a major, a major effort, like the floor-to-ceiling glass isn't an issue in how you've designed this, because my hope would be down the line there would be a recognition that that vibrant retail corner and what it would do is necessary, is what I'm saying. And I really mean this, like in Playhouse Square, think of how awful that corner would be if that Starbucks were not there, if you had to go inside the Hannah building to get into it. And I believe that when this is built and down the line in 5 and 10 years, there will be more openness to this.
I don't disagree. We've talked about a lot of flexibility with everything that we're designing here. We want to have the most amount of flexibility. We've designed even the interior doors that can open up, and we can do different things. So I think that is, I don't know exactly what that takes from an architectural standpoint, but if we reserve the flexibility to open that up at some point in the future, if we so choose.
I mean, I would appreciate it, because honestly, for me, this is like extraordinary project. It is just the future of what I think will happen over time, hopefully, because while the city of Cleveland, I'm not going to blame Freddie, has progressive regulations about liners in parking garages, the irony is we actually don't have them in our buildings. So if you think about large institutional buildings that are kind of blocks and blocks to walk by, and they're very difficult because they're just blank, we actually have that regulation for parking garages, but we actually don't have it for buildings. And so anyway, if we did, this would not be a problem. So anyway, I'm glad you're open to it. If we could incorporate that in, so that it could be very easily done. And then it would also encourage, when you get down to actually laying out the layout of the barista, that they might actually lay it out in a way that wouldn't prevent that on the inside as well. Because if you don't articulate it, then eventually how that is laid out won't encourage that to happen down the line. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
The answer to this could simply be security or no, but it is still about this lobby, and it's more just like I just want clarification, because the way you've designed it is kind of like an arcade where you have a point of security access, if I'm reading it right, to the north. And then to the south is basically flexible of like whether you're going to keep it open for your company or whether you're going to keep it open for the public. But I think the way it's designed right now gives you that flexibility, if I'm reading it correctly. I just wanted clarity because it's small. I don't know what your plans are. You don't have to answer me what your plans are. It really reminds me of this building on 49th and Park Avenue in New York. It's the exact same situation. It was a corporate headquarters, but during the day, the whole lobby was public, and I could go in there and have a coffee. I think there's a Bluebird coffee there. But it reminds me of that. But that was it was just, because I see the way you designed it is, there's access to the top that's controlled, and the bottom is open. It's just ultimately a question of, will you let people through that lobby? Like an arcade. We have, I think, 2 arcades here in Cleveland that are fabulous. I use them to cut through all the time through the cold. And I think you design it in a way that will keep your building secure. It's just, that's the question for you guys is, are you going to plan on opening up that bottom half or not? Ultimately, that's not an answer I'm forced to make you answer, but it's something for me to make you guys think about. So otherwise, I'm excited.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, I don't want to beat that horse to death, but it seems extremely plausible given the this facade is mostly glass on that side, if I'm not mistaken, on the Superior side. And having a system where that glass can open and close would be ideal for that potential use in the future. And that should be something you guys take a look at exploring because it's very, very feasible and it's still safe and secure because you have the ability to close and lock, you know, that curtain wall system. So I just want to reiterate that. And again, that also helps this building become more ingrained in the square and in the fabric of the city. So I think that's a really legit recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Who has an ask a question that wants to?
I did.
Oh, go ahead.
What I want to hear is for you to expound on your security within the parking lot. What are your plans for security within the parking lot? And I have a follow-up question after that as well.
Yeah, if you can maybe go to that. So right now, there's, current black wrought iron, it's not really wrought iron, but it looks like wrought iron fencing that goes around. We would intend to keep that or, look at other options that would secure this and create at least a dividing line. I mean, someone can hop over it, but at least it creates that separation between where the public sidewalk stops and where the private property starts. We would have security cameras that, especially in this side, that would be monitored by, our own security staff, and site lighting, all throughout. We haven't submitted, I don't think, a formal, full site lighting plan, or maybe it was in there. But that would be our idea for security for this parking lot. This parking lot to the north, again, it would be a lot of the same. The only thing different is this probably would be, at least until it's developed for future, would be a public parking lot that we would allow both, Sherwin people and the public to park in.
And that would include the parking garage as well? You have security?
Oh, yeah, secure. I'm sorry. So the parking garage obviously would be access controlled for our employees. There would be, right now the plan is it would be just Sherwin parking during, normal weekdays.
Okay.
We haven't made a decision yet about what we could do in the evenings or on the weekends. That's still kind of up in the air from an operational standpoint. But again, we're trying to design it with the optionality to do many different things.
Okay. If this plan is approved, what is your construction schedule? When do you plan to begin construction?
So we're already out there moving a little bit of dirt right now, and what we're doing is some environmental test excavation work that's being done right now. Mm-hmm. There's also the need to do some test caissons that we're doing, but we would be looking at, as soon as that finishes up, to transition in January to actually start, I believe we've got our mass excavation permit that's been submitted, and so we'd be looking at, starting this in January.
Okay. And the reason why I asked is because Cleveland has hosted a lot of very successful conventions and major events. And in February, the world is going to be looking at us again for NBA All-Star Weekend. And around West 6th Street, West 3rd, in that area, it's a lot of activity that's going to be going on, as well as the hotels downtown. And I was wondering if you have a plan that will allow the traffic to move without blocking those streets during that time, because once again, we don't want to be looked upon as an eyesore when that weekend happens. We have to really think about that.
Yeah, well, we're working with the city right now on a site logistics plan that will fence off different portions of the site and the roads at different times.
I had to leave in a second. but I believe this was mentioned a couple times in the previous design review committee. I can't, in part, or underscore the importance of urban design, streetscape, landscaping coming back as a separate meeting so that we understand what it is you intend to do, which would include all that was mentioned. I'm not going to repeat it, but I think it's vitally important that there's probably some street sections so you can understand the context that might happen along sections of the street on all sides of the development, as well as what might happen across the street. Obviously, I know you have no control over that, but maybe that you could create sort of the test case or the example that one might follow to help enforce this major investment.
I just only have a question on landscape, on which you already have. If you can go to the pavilion east, that doesn't matter which one of the site plans that you can show on the screen. You show a lot of low walls on there. I'm just wondering, could you just show your intent of that? And I'm happy that you allowing the guest visitors to walk through. So do you have a purpose and what's the material of that low wall?
Yes.
Because I noticed there's a lot of locations of it.
This is actually, this low wall, is this the one you're referring to along here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's actually a security feature that's been built in. We looked at trying to push the security. You know, obviously we want to protect, I don't know if people have been watching, but there's been several, and we had it happen at our current building. People have driven across the sidewalk, and we've had car accidents hitting the building. So we wanted to do something to try to prevent that. And our initial plan was to kind of do something out here, and it just didn't feel right. And it kind of really created a huge separation between almost too much of a separation between the sidewalk and what becomes our landscape area. So we brought this wall in order to, it still kind of acts as a crash barrier. So if a car skips the sidewalk here and you know, it doesn't go in and either damage the building or injure the people that are inside. So that was the idea behind the wall.
But you also have a low wall at the pavilion looking east. There's another location, it's about approximate location where A is. Going, if you want to show, I'm looking at the site plan.
Maybe Jared?
It's away from the building.
Is there anything out here?
Yeah.
We don't have any walls.
Yeah, well, just look at the perspective drawings.
Do you have raised planters here?
So we have, the raised planter is along this location. It bumps out.
Okay.
The entry in here, and then again, kind of on this north section. It may be a perspective looking back towards Public Square.
All right. I'm looking at, this is your site view?
So that's looking back, yes.
Yeah, so what is, yeah.
So that wall would be in this location right here.
Okay.
And that view would be looking back towards. So you can kind of see it.
Yeah, that wall's one example.
So the entry is just behind these two.
Okay.
Public Square is crossed over.
So my question was, is it a tent for individuals to sit on there? Is it an example of seating?
It wasn't designed as seating, it was designed for barrier protection. You can see there's some bollards, but we didn't want to have a line of bollards all the way across the front of the building. So this was an alternative that we looked at to try to make it more aesthetically pleasing and but still provide the same security.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Fred.
So just
turn on your microphone.
real quick, with respect to the exterior parking area, the safety issue I thought was a very important piece of the puzzle. Is there any camera system on site at all?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you've ever met our director of security. There will be multiple cameras. In fact, he wasn't very happy about all the trees because obviously they block the view of the cameras. We haven't finished up our entire security plan yet, but I mean, if you were to come to our building today, you don't hardly notice them, but we have cameras. We're watching you everywhere.
Wow.
I'm sure you're not going to show us that one either.
The other,
But just so you know, you can put cameras in trees.
The other two items here has to do with the exterior parking areas. So bicycle parking, because obviously I'm sure you're going to have folks biking to work, given the number of employees that you have. Could you let us know where they are going to be located, the bicycle parking, and how you plan to organize that? And then the other component of that's related more on the vehicular side is EV charging facilities on site. Where would those be located?
Yeah. So to answer the first one, we definitely will have bike racks. We actually have a pretty big biking culture at our office. So I think, Matt, were those designed on the inside of the garage? I think we have bike racks on the inside of the garage. We haven't really, and I think it was one of the comments that was made by the Design Review Committee about all of the different site amenities, trash cans, bike racks. We haven't really laid those out yet, but I would anticipate there would be some of both. And then your second question was
the EV charging facilities.
Yes, so we're looking at probably not doing those out in the parking lot. It's a little more challenging to do the exterior ones, but we would have some EV charging stations within the parking garage. And I don't know if anyone remembers the exact number. John, do you remember how many we had planned? We had a handful of them that are planned, and we're looking. We've at least sized the transformers to be able to handle a certain number, and then have run the conduits.
Yeah.
The idea would be, and then look at putting them in afterwards.
Yeah, I just want to say that's very real.
Yep.
A lot of people blow that off, but the industry is changing overnight with respect to that. In the next decade, everybody's going to be driving these vehicles.
Yeah, I hear it from all the people with the Teslas.
Yeah.
Okay, Giancarlo, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question for the landscape person. Was Jim McKnight did he have a voice in the planning of the landscaping for this building? Jim McKnight, he's the city architect who has a great history of tree selection.
He's the landscape architect for the
Sorry?
city.
We have not visited.
Okay. Are you planning on it, or are you thinking about it?
We can definitely reach out.
Okay.
He's on the 5th floor.
Yeah.
Great.
He's one of the foremost experts in the country, really, on Ohio trees and Ohio landscaping. He's a
Great. We do have a local partner that we
yeah,
have been working
I'm sure, yes, of
with,
course.
Daru Landscape Architecture.
Okay,
So-
the other question I have is, what are the approximate sizes of these trees that you're planning on planting, on putting in?
So in some locations, we're 100 gallon and 65 gallon?
What caliper?
2.5 inch caliper.
Okay. Also, I'd like to inform you that Ohio is world famous for nurseries, and they have trees that are 30 or 40 feet tall, which would be, one of the concerns, again, that I have is we keep talking about walkability and pedestrian and whatever. The environment we're creating when we build such structures is really about 15 or 20 feet high. So we want to fill that space with walkability concepts, not kind of just cover the earth and separate ourselves from it, but somehow unite ourselves to it. So somebody suggested pouring something shiny on the concrete. Shiny concrete doesn't make it a better walking location. Can we pour less concrete and plant more trees and maybe do some paving instead of just laying another layer of concrete over the earth? Has that been considered?
We've looked at getting a balance of,
Or pavers, like stone pavers, for example, would be.
So at the entries to the buildings, to both the pavilion and to the office tower, we do have enhanced paving. So it's not stone pavers. We're looking at concrete unit pavers that'll have kind of a nice relationship to, the color that'll be right at the base.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other commission members, any other questions?
David.
Mr. Chairman.
I have a question, David. Oh. Go ahead, there was one on the
Go
far
ahead.
right. Go ahead.
Councilman.
That's a question.
Just a point of clarification on the point that was made with the motion under design review for the avian plan, that the plan comes back to the city. I just want to confirm that there's recourse. The city can review that plan and require or request modifications. That it's not just the provision of a plan and it's a document. That's the intent of the motion, correct?
So I was going to cover this at the end, but since you brought it up, based on what's being articulated today from design review, and I don't know how this commission is going to vote, this will allow them to move forward with the continuation of constructing their building. All of the things that are suggested here can be dealt with. It's not going to slow you from construction. But we will need to revisit these items, and you'll be able to share them and make these adjustments that are being recommended. All right, so it's not going to slow you from construction. So I do want to emphasize that. And you'll see that based on what I'm hearing in the motion and the motions from the previous committee with respect to the items that are of concern. It does not stop you from moving forward with constructing, but there are elements you're going to have to consider. So to your point, Councilman, it won't be an exercise in futility with respect to them coming back and sharing this information, because they have been very responsive from my perspective with respect to the suggestions that have been coming out so far.
Thank you, and I think that's the appropriate strategy to move forward. This is obviously such a big project, and but as you said, there's nothing at this point that I'm hearing from either any entity in these conversations preventing a foundation and the vertical construction of a tower. It's a lot of these things that would be further down the line of the project. Something just as I was looking through, and this is more for this table than the audience, but when I saw the nighttime elevation with the LED coloring and you had Tower City in the background, is it worth us thinking through, do we need some sort of city policy on how those lights are coordinated? So as we get additional towers, it's not haphazard of all different colors, and like you have the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so terminal towers lit up pink, and is there a coordination that everything else is going to be pink? And it looks like this pulls the downtown together instead of just being like a laser light show as you're on the highway driving past. So something for us to think about, but it's not contingent upon, it doesn't need to be included in any motion for this project now.
That actually, so Destination Cleveland has reached out to Sherwin-Williams. We are in conversations with Destination Cleveland that is attempting to do exactly that. Coordinate the lighting and the public experience on Public Square, coordinate all the lighting, coordinate all of those things. So there is a movement afoot to address that. I don't know if it's a city, where it originated, but Destination Cleveland at this present time, David Gilbert is on the ball on that.
I think there has to be a thought about self-expression too as part of that, because I'm sure Sherwin-Williams wants to celebrate certain things that maybe Tower City doesn't. So I think self-expression, but coordination is good. Anyone else?
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Everyone's got a mask on. I can't see you move your mouth.
I brought up a couple meetings ago commissioning public art for the project, a permanent, substantial installation of public art. I think back on when BP built the building on Public Square, and they commissioned Claes Oldenburg to create an artwork, which was the free stamp, which they rejected. So I don't know if since then other entities have been a little shy about doing such a thing, but it's such an iconic building that you're building. I think it should be paired with some, substantial artwork. I think that would really be a benefit to you and the city to have something, a statement. It's maybe like something colorful, something, that's connotes the philosophy and the history of your organization.
We agree with you. I mean, we're all for that. We like the color. I know Julie's been working with Land Studio. We've talked, we've had discussions about, what a public art program would look like. We talked about, doing public art along the vacated Frankfurt. I think there's a lot of opportunities. We're not that yet. We're not there yet in the planning.
Yeah, I'm looking at it a little differently than just, possibly murals that are, somewhat more ephemeral. I'm looking at something more substantial, something that really is going to be a statement, a lasting statement. I don't know if it can be put out for proposals, or, there can be a selection of a piece of artwork which will really be emblematic for your building, and something that will really enhance, like, permanently the location and what you're doing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I want to thank the design team. I think it's a wonderful and exciting project for downtown, but also to say thanks for taking the comments from the September meeting to heart and making those revisions that will make it an even better project. So I would like to move approval, Mr. Chairman, on this resolution, adding the amendments that were added by design review, and in addition, the two that you articulated at the beginning of this session. And so that is my motion.
Okay, so
Approval of
cover these.
final design.
But I can at least articulate. So I'll be the second, and the two were, first was where the garage, sorry. The two, so I'm a second to the motion. The two was where you've pulled the garage back 5 feet there. There is, design review forgot to add the comment of the 6-inch caliper trees. And then the comment that I made, which is to design in today the provisions for the storefront or retail access down the line in the future, but that actually be incorporated today in the design of the exterior on both corners of Superior and Public Square for the retail. I think those are the only two. But to the councilman's question, this is approval with these conditions. The landscaping, not the landscaping, the landscaping amenities and other aspects will come back when you come back to address these items that were in design review. So we will see you again, but it will be for those items down the line.
There's probably some other things that you probably haven't shown us yet, some on-site signage and stuff like that. And you talked about bicycles, but, cleaning all that stuff up at the next meeting, but this will get your building in the ground.
So, Mr. Chairman, I accept those additional amendments to my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. Further discussion, anyone?
What about the pavilion to make it more into a public space rather than a private entrance?
Well, it gives them the future to do that later on, but right now it's private space. Okay, so we have a motion and second. Any other further discussion? Freddie, call the roll, please.
Anderson.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Bonesi.
Yes.
Bowling.
Yes.
Palikia.
Yes.
Collier. Downey.
Yes.
Dreyer. Fluka. Curry.
Yes.
McCray Scott.
Yes.
Slife.
Yes.
Tarasi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much for your investment and a very nice presentation. Good luck.
In closing, I just want to emphasize the fact that you are approved with these conditions. You are able to move forward with your development.
We will work with Matt and the team and Tim to schedule the return meeting to share the conditions or the responses to the conditions that were added. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.